Hello out there, everyone. Today we're going to take a quick look at my top shelf. And this particular top shelf features my Nick Cage collection, some Umbrella Entertainment, some MVD releases, a Blue Underground, some Severin, and then some Kino classics, and then Kino Lorber. So let's jump right in, shall we? First up is Adaptation, which of course is actually a Shout Select release, but again, I've chosen to keep all of my Nick Cage films more or less up here. Great movie. I have a video on it that goes into much more detail, but suffice to say, I think it's one of his best. Then we've got Werner Herzog directing Nick in Bad Lieutenant. So basically a remake of the original film by Abel Ferrara starring Harvey Keitel. It's a good flick. I don't think it's as good as that original, but it's well made. It has a nice turn by Val Kilmer as well. Color Out of Space, a H.P. Lovecraft adaptation directed by Richard Stanley, and cosmic horror done right. That's all I'll say about that. Stanley did a good job. Then Dream Scenario here, which of course is an A24 release, came out last year. I really liked the first half. I felt like the film sort of fell off the track in Act 3, but it's still a very interesting and very original screenplay, and Nick Cage plays a character I've never seen him play before, which was, I think, a nice acting turn by him. He did a great job in the part. Drive Angry, definitely a guilty pleasure. Not a good film, but Nick's fun in it, and it's got William Fichtner too, who I really enjoy. Face Off, one of my favorites of his. I thought Travolta and Nick both did a great job riffing off one another. And funny story on that, apparently just before filming, Nick and John were at a party, and everyone knew that they were going to be playing in that film, and apparently they just took to riffing off one another and imitating each other at the party, and apparently it was just epic. It was, I guess, a sign that the movie was going to do all right, and in fact, it did more than that. I think it's, again, one of Woo's best, and I think it's definitely one of Cage's and Travolta's best. I have a lot of fun every time I put that on. Then we've got Joe, film directed by David Gordon Green, who of course went on to do the new Halloween trilogy. Ty Sheridan is in it. Really good character study. I enjoyed that one quite a bit. Then we have Knowing, Nicolas Cage, sci-fi, directed by the same gentleman who did The Crow and Dark City, Alex Proyas. Also did I, Robot. Then we've got Leaving Las Vegas, just a terrific film, depressing beyond belief, but beautiful. Lord of War, which incidentally, I believe they're working on a sequel to this right now as I make this film, this short vid. Definitely a very interesting, non-Hollywood type film. It's not his best film, but I think it's a good one and a very interesting subject matter done with some real original flair. Then we've got Panos Cosmatos's Mandy, basically a mushroom trip horror film. Very, very odd, but well done. Beautiful colors. Pig, movie that I really enjoyed. Very understated, almost to the point of being boring, quite frankly. But, you know, Nick Cage, he can basically do no wrong, and I think he does a great job in the part. It's definitely a good film and one to watch, and I think one that has good rewatch value, but it's absolutely not John Wick with a pig. Matchstick Men, Ridley Scott, really good character study of con artists played by Nick Cage and Sam Rockwell. Really enjoyed this movie. I think it was one of his better ones. Raising Arizona, the Coen brothers, need we say more? It's a great, crazy, you know, Roadrunner type film. Sympathy for the Devil. Now, of course, this is a steelbook, but I'll say that it's a really good turn for Nick. He plays, you know, a crazy character, but it's an interesting low budget sort of psychological horror piece with Joel Kinnaman actually doing a pretty good job. I am not the biggest Joel Kinnaman fan. I thought his performance in the RoboCop remake was pretty dreadful, but I don't know. I think the movie itself should have never been made. Renfeld, this is another one that's complicated. I think every time Nick Cage is on screen, it's awesome. He is terrific in it. He really, if you'll forgive the pun, sinks his teeth into the part. And I think his you know, chemistry with Nicholas Hoult is also solid. But I think the whole other subplot with Awkwafina and the corrupt police and the local mobsters, just dumb, really dumb, not well thought out, and I'm just bummed about it because I think if they just made a movie about Dracula starring Nicolas Cage, it would have been amazing. The Trust, this is a really good little character study with terrific Elijah Wood and Nicolas Cage, of course. I really like this movie. I thought it punched way above its weight. Then Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent. This is a fun movie. It's not great, but it has some, you know, if you're a Nick Cage fan, I think it's definitely a must watch. And I think that the chemistry between Pedro Pascal and Nicolas Cage is great. But like Renfeld, there's this whole other plot with Tiffany Haddish and the CIA, and it's just goofy. I think it could have just stood alone as just Nick Cage in a midlife career crisis, personal crisis, goes to a rich person's home and sort of becomes the guy's friend. I think that could have been the movie right there. They didn't need that whole other subplot. Valley Girl, also another Shout Select film, but I opt to keep it up here with the other Nick Cage films. Obviously, this was the movie that sort of got him started. Deborah Foreman was in it. I thought, you know, I remember seeing this for the first time on VHS and really liking it, and I've subsequently seen it several times since, and it holds up. It's got a great soundtrack, just an amazing little time capsule of a film. I would put this right alongside Fast Times at Ridgemont High as being like sort of the best of like, you know, early 80s high school dramas. Then we have Vampire's Kiss, where Nick does maybe play a vampire. At least he thinks he's a vampire. This movie's just, if you'll forgive the pun, bat poop crazy. It's really bizarre, but I love it. And Nick Cage eats a cockroach. Wild at Heart, David Lynch, Nick Cage, Laura Dern, Willem Dafoe. Really, really interesting movie. I love it. Then we've got Umbrella Entertainment. And I figured I'd just save the last Nick Cage one, which happens to be an Umbrella. Just put it right here, even though it's not in alphabetical order. This is Red Rock West, their collector's edition John Dahl film, starring a wonderful cast of characters. Dennis Hopper, Nick Cage, Laura Flynn Boyle, J.T. Walsh, Dwight Yoakam is in it. It's just, it feels like Twin Peaks adjacent. So if you're into Twin Peaks at all, it just has that sort of vibe. It almost feels like a sort of a sibling to Wild at Heart. I love this movie. I've seen it several times. Wonderful soundtrack. Then we've got Big Night with Stanley Tucci, Tony Shalhoub, Ian Holm, Minnie Driver, Isabella Rossellini. Great foodie movie. Love it. It's very entertaining. Bully by Larry Clark. Just a difficult watch, but great. Then we've got The Cook, The Thief, His Wife and Her Lover. This, of course, is Peter Greenaway. Very beautiful, amazing visual film. Definitely not an easy watch. The lead character played by Michael Gambon is just absolutely just the most vile bore you can think of, and I don't think there's any coincidence that you see the pig up there. I mean, he's just so piggy. It's very hard to watch them, to be honest, but nonetheless, it's still a beautiful film, and stars a wonderful Helen Mirren as well, and a young Tim Roth. Then we have Patrick, an exploitation horror film that was brought to my attention by Quentin Tarantino, and I thought it was terrific. It's definitely right up there with some of the best Australian horror that I've seen, for example, like Road Games and so forth. But highly recommended. And then we have Showgirls. This is not a good movie, but it's such a unique piece of cinema and has some of the most unintentionally funny scenes, or maybe it was intentional, I don't know. But I remember seeing it in theaters opening weekend, and wow, what a movie-going experience. That crowd was definitely interesting. But suffice to say, there's a wonderful documentary on this release that goes into the film, and Elizabeth Berkley and the sort of fallout. It seemed like the only person that really managed to walk away unscathed was Gina Gershon, who is just pitch perfect in it. I definitely think it's one of those wonderful midnight movie, so bad it's good movies. Despite the fact that Paul Verhoeven directed it, I still can't fathom what he was thinking. He's just sort of kind of got spun off the rails there. Then we've got The Dentist 1 and 2 by MVD Collection, I think. Or no, this is a Vestron video. And, these movies are not high art by any stretch, but I will tell you that they're pretty fun. And Corbin Burnson, who plays the titular dentist, is really good in it. It has a very blink and you'll miss it cameo in the first film with, who's the Mark Ruffalo is in it, in the waiting room. And he's pretty piggy. I'm sure he probably isn't terribly proud of this. At least the character he plays is not a very nice guy. But having said all that, I remember seeing it on VHS and thinking it was pretty damn fun to watch. Very funny. And then when I revisited both, I was struck by how well they hold up. Just go in with the proper expectations. Then we've got Miami Blues, starring a very young Alec Baldwin and Jennifer Jason Leigh and Fred Ward. I really enjoy this film. It's kind of like black comedy noir. Then we've got Parents, Crazy Randy Quaid, Mary Beth Hurt, Sandy Dennis. Very odd horror film with some tremendous production value and some rather interesting flourishes on the cinematography side. Bob Balaban directed it, the actor, and I thought he did a good job. Then we've got Blue Underground's God Told Me To, Larry Cohen movie, just absolutely crazy, but actually very interesting, and some terrific dramatic moments in it with some very sharp dialogue. I recommend it, even though the third act is a bit of a reach. Lost Soul, the doomed journey of Richard Stanley when he was tapped to do The Island of Dr. Moreau with Val Kilmer and Marlon Brando. It was just an absolute train wreck, and this is one of the best films on, basically a production gone completely awry, and it's really funny, incidentally, but it's kind of sad. Richard Stanley definitely paid for that for many years until he finally got out of jail with Color Out of Space, only to then get back in the freezer with some rather unfortunate allegations that I don't know where they ever, if they were borne out to be true or not. But he's had a pretty rough go of things. Pretty good director, though. Then here we have Dennis Hopper's Out of the Blue. Very, very interesting, dark drama. Severin Films released this, and it's definitely a piece of cinematic history. Highly recommend it, but it's not an easy watch. Now we're getting into the Kino discs. We have The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, which of course, if you are into Tim Burton, watch this and you'll see where he got a lot of his ideas. David Lynch often cites this as one of his favorite films, and I can see why. It's visually very arresting and incredibly imaginative. Definitely worth a watch. Then we have Nosferatu, the original, which is just, you know, it's a masterpiece. And even though I really like the Werner Herzog remake, which is next to this with Klaus Kinski, I think they both sort of sit alongside one another with their respective merits completely intact. I don't think one takes away from the other. I think they're both just amazing films. And then as far as the Kino Studio Classic line, we've got 2 Days in the Valley, a film with just a terrific cast, very Pulp Fiction-esque, definitely fits in that sort of mid-90s intersecting stories set of films, but I really liked it, and I recall, and I know that Jeff Daniels, rather, he just gave a tremendous performance and was criminally overlooked when it came rather to award season that year. I really like this film. Then we have After Dark, My Sweet, based on a Jim Thompson novel, starring Jason Patric, Rachel Ward, and Bruce Dern. Really good film with a pretty unexpected twist at the end. Then we have 12 Angry Men, classic with Henry Fonda, Sidney Lumet movie. It's arguably the best legal drama ever, and it certainly is a film that rightfully is shown in pretty much every law school. I think it should be shown in high school, to be honest, because everyone should know how the jury system works. Then we have Eastern Promises, a David Cronenberg film. I really enjoy this. I think Viggo has rarely been better. He was terrific in that role, and he has a pretty crazy fight scene in that for those who have seen it, you'll understand what I'm talking about. I've never seen a fight sequence quite like that. Then we have Escape from Alcatraz, a Clint Eastwood prison escape drama based on real events. And it's funny, rewatching this, I was struck by how much The Shawshank Redemption cribbed from this film. And I really enjoyed the movie. I thought it held up, and fascinating, true story. Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, Jim Carrey's best by a pretty wide margin. Truman Show would be, his second best in my opinion. But this is a terrific, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, yeah, Charlie Kaufman wrote it and Michel Gondry directed it. Very, very unique take on relationships. Then we have John Woo's Hard Target, starring Jean-Claude Van Damme, rather. Probably the only film that I can watch of JCVD's. I don't think he's a particularly good actor, but I thought John Woo really brought this film to life. And of course it has Lance Henriksen in it, who I'm a big fan of. And to be honest, I think they should have focused on his character a little more. But I really enjoy this film. It's beautifully shot. New Orleans is an amazing town. And even though it's a more stylized version of New Orleans, because when you watch it, you think to yourself, where are all the tourists? Because if you've ever been in New Orleans, it's basically a city that never sleeps, and there's tourists everywhere through the quarter. And there's a lot of scenes in that film where there's just basically no one walking around, and it's broad daylight. Then you've got The Hunter, Steve McQueen, his last film, very good actioneer. Then we have The Invasion of the Body Snatchers, the remake with Donald Sutherland. Really enjoyed this film. I thought it captured the essence of the original and elevated the material somewhat with obviously better special effects and some terrific acting by Donald Sutherland. Then we have The Lost Highway, David Lynch. An inscrutable film from a narrative point of view, but it does start to make sense after you've watched it a few times, not unlike Mulholland Drive. I think it's a really good film. It's just, man, that first watch, you're just thinking, what in the hell did I just watch? It doesn't really make any sense upon an initial viewing, but it's typical Lynch dream logic, and it eventually does sort of stitch together after you've seen it a few times. Burt Reynolds' Breaking In, written by John Sayles, directed by Bill Forsyth. I really like this film. I thought it was well done. Heat, another Burt Reynolds film, rather enjoy. This is sort of what I would consider his arguably underappreciated 4 or 5, 6 year period in the 80s where I thought he actually did have quite a few good films. This was one of them. Then there was Malone. Looks like that's upside down. Terrific and kind of timely story about some basically secessionists slash preppers, and Burt Reynolds' character Malone sort of running into them and, you know, kind of dealing with them as they try to like bully the local townspeople. And then I'll just jump ahead real quick. The other one is Stick, which is of course based on a Elmore Leonard source, and is sort of a Miami noir film with just a fabulous 80s synth score. I really like the film. It was not received well when it came out, but I don't care, I like it. Then we have Alan Parker's Mississippi Burning with Willem Dafoe and Gene Hackman. Great film. Obviously, you know, there was some question about its veracity, especially in the third act, but I think the main beats are obviously true, and you know, I think that overall the story is pretty historically accurate when you look at the big picture, and it's compelling cinema. Really tense and kind of sad psychological crime procedural slash thriller. Then you have My Bodyguard, starring Chris Makepeace, Matt Dillon, and Adam Baldwin. And then North Dallas 40, which is a Ted Kochev film. Really surprisingly good football movie. You know, football movies are not usually very good. I would offer that as a counterexample to that assumption. And then finally, To Live and Die in LA, William Friedkin film starring Willem Dafoe, and I don't know why I have a hard time remembering that guy's name. William Peterson, who was in CSI, and then John Pankow. It also has a early John Turturro in it. Dean Stockwell's in it. This film looks great, by the way. The 4K release just looks scrumptious, and it was lensed by Robbie Mueller, who is an amazing cinematographer who chose to use natural light whenever possible, and obviously that can be very difficult, but he managed to do it and do it well. So there you have it. There's my Nick Cage section, my Umbrella Entertainment and MVD and Vestron Video section, with a little bit of Severin Films in there, and then finally some Kino and Kino Lorber releases as well. So on that note, I just hope everyone out there is well. Perhaps you've got some that you'd like to share with me from these lines that perhaps I should add to my shelf. Please feel free to comment below. But until that next time, whatever it shall be, please do take care out there. Stay safe, be kind, and by all means, please keep watching good cinema.